Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto had demonic fox inside and become hunter. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. He held up the necklace he had found in the trash can he had been digging through. It sparkled in the sunlight, and he had to shield his eyes from the light that was reflecting off of it. It soon died down, and he looked at it once more. The necklace part of it was just a simple black string, which felt like hair in his hands. Rough hair. The ornament which was on the string was what had reflected the light. It was a fang, around 2 inches long, and an inch wide. It was a dull white in color, and when he put his index finger to the point of it, and pressed lightly, his finger not bleeding despite the sharpness. "What you got there, Gaki?" A snide comment reached his ears. On the inside he groaned, and quickly thought of a plan to escape. He turned around, and saw his goons had surrounded him. He moaned out loud, and quickly stuffed the necklace with a fang down his shirt. "Nothing, Osku Teme," he said, turning around and looking up at the older and much bigger boy. Osku was another orphan living on the streets, just like him. While he had almost no brains, which Naruto was practically made of, he made up for it in sheer strength. Unlike him, however, he was a delinquent, stealing his things and beating people up for money. At the age of 14, he was even the leader of his own gang, who was currently surrounding Naruto. "Nothing, he remarked, sneering at him. He got his face close to Naruto's, and he could smell his horrible breath. "Are you sure?" Naruto refrained from making a snide comment at him, and only nodded his head. He wasn't afraid of these kids. He wasn't at all like them. He earned and found his stuff the fair way, by working. "Are you really sure?" The threat was evident in the boy's tone of voice, because I can check if you want. He crept his hand along Naruto's face, who had almost jumped from the contact. "I said I don't have anything, Osku Teme," Naruto said, grinding his teeth together. "Are you sure?" He pestered him again, letting his hand fall to his side. "You've already asked that question, Osku Teme, and I've already answered it," he said, narrowing his eyes at the much bigger boy, who was now looking confused. "If you're going to ask something, make sure it's not something you already said." Osku looked down at him, anger on his face. "Are you saying I'm not smart enough to know when I haven't or have asked the same question before?" The boy balled his hands into fists, but that didn't stop Naruto from answering. "Yes, I am," he stated bluntly, looking up and staring straight into the older boy's face. "Are you sure?" he questioned again, to the snickers of his gang. "Are you really sure?" "Yes, I'm really sure. In fact, you just asked the same questions twice more." He wasn't going to take Asuku's bullying him anymore. Every time he did, Osku would steal something from him, something he had worked hard to get. For some reason, not many people would give jobs to the 4-year-old boy, always saying that they didn't need anyone when the signs outside their doors said help wanted. Even if he did find a job, he would soon lose it, from reasons such as, "You don't work hard enough," or, "That's not how it's done," despite the fact he worked harder than every other employee, and did a better job at it. Every time he did earn money though, Osku would always ask for payment, which usually resulted in him not having anything left over. He always handed the money over, knowing that one day Osku would get his. This time, he would not let the necklace go. For some reason, it seemed very important to him. "Are you sure about that?" Osku questioned him once more, to the full-blown laughter of the rest of his gang. He silenced them with a glare and turned back to Naruto, cracking his knuckles. Naruto just looked at him defiantly, and Osku gave the motion to attack. Naruto was smart, and able to anticipate where the first one would strike. He ran straight to Osku, who hadn't expected that, and head-butted him, knocking him to the floor and evading the attack that would have come from behind. He then moved his head to the left, and a fist came soaring past his ear, missing him. He kicked out, hitting the boy that had tried punching him in the groin, causing him to drop. In all the fights he had witnessed, he had seen the same things being used over and over. If you were surrounded, the first attack most likely would come from behind. Most of the time, people aimed for the head, thinking it would be the easiest part to hit, and hoping for some one-hit KO move that would instantly drop your opponent. What they didn't seem to think of, however, was the fact that someone's skull is a hard part of their body and was a small target to hit. In front of him, a boy rushed towards him and jumped into the air, attempting to do some sort of karate kick. It failed, when Naruto pressed himself against the wall, and the boy landed where he had once stood. He ducked, as the boy tried kicking him again. Because of his short stature, he was able to effectively dodge it, and as he brought his knee up, hitting this man in the groin, dropping him. He wasn't embarrassed at all by hitting someone in such a dirty place. If it works, was his personal motto. Another boy came up this time, and Naruto couldn't avoid being hit by him, as he came barreling into his side. He was knocked to the ground along with the boy, who had started hitting him with his fists soon after. A punch caught him in the stomach, and he cried out in pain, his small body not being able to fully handle it. Another punch caught him, this time in the face, as he spat out blood. Another person joined in, laughing as he kicked his ribs, the breath being knocked out of his body. He opened his mouth, and the boy punched it. He felt some of his teeth being chipped, and it hurt like hell. Luckily, it served an excellent purpose for him. The boy who had punched him had cut his knuckles on his teeth, and had pulled back in shock. This gave Naruto his opportunity, as threw his head forward and sunk his chipped teeth into the boy's ear. He screamed, and Naruto quickly ran out from under him. The boy that had been kicking him in the ribs followed Naruto, chasing him down. When a person usually tried attacking a running person from behind, they don't normally throw themselves at the person. They usually try to match their speed, and punch them in the face, adhering to their natural thought process. Just as he predicted, the boy was coming up on his side, his fist raised. Naruto dove in front of the boy suddenly, just as he was about to punch him. He tucked his knees in, like a turtle, and the boy couldn't stop in time, as his momentum forced him to run into Naruto's back, tripping over the fallen boy and hitting his skull against the ground in a daze. Naruto got up, cracking his back a little. The boy's shoes had hurt his spine a lot, and he seemed a little damaged. The rest of the boys surrounded him, all holding pocket knives in their hands. Their eyes glinted dangerously, looking at the small boy with an almost predatory expression on their faces. They circled around him, waiting for any move. Statistically speaking, there was a nearly 50% chance the boys would attack all at once, or a 50% chance that they would try the same tactic, and try to attack him from behind again. Thinking quickly, he got onto his hands and knees, crying and letting sobs rack his small frame. "Please," he cried to them, "don't kill me." He put his hands onto a prayer position, and started bowing to the boy in front of him. There was too much of a risk there, if he chose wrong. It was better to not risk it. Live to fight another day, if you survived the fight yesterday. That was another of his self-made mottos. "Please," he told, "kill me." Now the little baka begs for mercy. Laughed Asuku, only now picking himself off the floor and rubbing his head where Naruto had hit him. "Maybe we should spare him, boys," he yelled to his gang, who laughed in response. Turning back to Naruto, he grinned, then spat in his face. "That hurt, you little prick," he told him, putting his foot on his head and pressing down. "Gomen, Asuku-sama." Naruto apologized quietly, seething on the inside. If only the risk wasn't so small, then he could. "I didn't hear that, Naru-chan," he chuckled to the boy, pressing down Naruto's face even harder into the ground, causing him to hiss in pain. "Speak up," he commanded. "Gomen, Asuku-sama," he said once more, louder into the ground. Asuku pressed his foot down even harder, and Naruto couldn't help but scream, as his face was being crushed. "Say it louder," he yelled down to him, laughing merrily. Though both ears of his were being pressed against something, he could hear the sound of laughter coming from all sides of him. "Gomen, Asuku-sama," he cried out, louder this time. It was for his safety. He was being realistic. If he tried to fight all of them, he would surely lose, and possibly suffer even more. Asuku picked his foot up as Naruto sighed in relief, and hauled himself up with his hands. It seemed the bastard was finally done. "Say it louder, Naru-chan," screamed the psychotic boy, slamming his foot straight into Naruto's head, causing him to go straight back down into the ground again, his skull nearly cracking at the sheer amount of pressure the boy was putting on him. "Scream it so the world can hear it," he cackled insanely, rubbing his foot into the back of Naruto's head. Naruto started crying, his mind holding onto the only thought keeping him conscious at this point. Just take it. At least it's only him, and not the rest of his playmates, he thought, his eyes tearing up. "Gomen, Asuku Kami," he screamed into the ground, warm sticky blood coming from his broken nose. "Gomen, Gomen, Gomen. Asuku leaned close into Naruto's ear, whispering, "Sorry for what? At least take your foot out so I can answer you properly," he thought on the inside, crying on the out. "F for making fun of you." He sobbed, trying to move his head. "And why are we sorry for that?" he asked him, his words full of an underlying threat. He was expecting Naruto to answer exactly, or else. "B because you are the G greatest, a Asuku Kami," he whispered back, as the older boy picked his foot off of him, wiping the blood from it onto the ground. "That's right, Naru-chan," he said smugly, spitting on the boy's head, "I am the greatest. I am the best, the one and only, Asuku Kami. You'd better remember it, Chibi Naru. You're going to be living with it the rest of your poor, short life." He chuckled, turning to his follower, giving them the signal to leave. Naruto had picked himself up off the floor, just as Asuku and his gang were leaving. He felt something cold slip down his shirt, going over his bloodied chest before thudding onto the floor. The sound of the impact upon the floor was unusually loud, as Asuku turned around, looking for what Naruto had just dropped. "Chikasho," he cursed silently out loud, throwing his body to cover up the necklace. It was too late, however, as Asuku and his gang had come rushing up. "What was that, Naru-chan?" grunted Asuku, kicking Naruto in the ribs, with all the force he could muster. "Come on, Naru-chan. You can tell your Oni-chans." Another member of Asuku's gang taunted, kicking Naruto in on the other side of his ribs. "Tell us, Chibi Naru." A smaller member of the group called to him mockingly. "You can tell your Oni-chans everything." He had curled up into a ball, his head protected by his chest, and the fang necklace right in front of his head. "Go on, Naru-chan, tell us," they chanted, kicking Naruto wherever they could get their feet to. A foot broke through his position, and slammed into Naruto's head, but he still didn't budge. This necklace compelled him to protect it, telling him to not let it go. Another foot broke through, slamming into the other side of his head. He cried out, as he felt something long and hard slam into his spine. He uncurled himself, gripping the necklace within his right hand, in a vice-like grip. The long and hard metal thing came again, slamming into his exposed stomach this time and causing more tears to leak from his eyes. "Yamaru," he whispered to the sky through his blurry eyesight, hoping that whatever god was listening would answer. "Yamaru Kudasai, please stop." "Stop what, Naru-chan?" snapped Asuku, slamming the metal pipe he held in his hands straight into Naruto's chest. "What do you want us to stop?" He raised the pipe again, and slammed it down once more, landing straight into Naruto's stomach. He coughed and sputtered, as blood came shooting out of his mouth, landing on Asuku and some of his men. "Looks like little Naru-chan's bleeding everyone," his eyes wide with excitement. "You're right," one of his men shouted, catching Asuku's drift and laughing out loud. "Maybe we should help him clean up." The others agreed, pulling down their pants. Naruto could feel the cold liquid dripping onto him, burning deep into his wounds with their slightly acidic content. The liquid stopped, and through his moans and groans of pain, Naruto could hear them all pulling up their pants. "Now that we've so graciously helped you clean, Chibi Naru." Asuku grinned, the maliciousness intentions hidden lightly in his voice. "Why don't you be a good boy and tell us what you've got?" Naruto only groaned and shifted to the right side, holding his right shoulder in pain, as blood drained freely from it and onto the ground. He still kept the necklace tightly gripped in his hand though, the desire to project it now more important than his own injuries. Opening his mouth and feeling his jaw crack, he rasped out, "No, Uteme." Asuku froze, hearing the words Naruto spoke, despite his voice volume. "Repeat that, Naruto." He asked him coldly, all teasing and playfulness gone from his voice. He was getting serious now. "I said no, in case you were deaf, Teme," rasped out Naruto louder than before. His mind was being filled with senseless thoughts of the fanged necklace, and protecting it from whoever wanted to take his precious from him. "Repeat it again, Naruto," Asuku said once more, gripping the metal pipe tighter in his hands. "One last time, so that everyone can hear." "No, Ikike," roughly meaning bitch, "I've said it twice before, baka. I'm not going to say it again, just because you can't hear." The rest of Asuku's gang gulped, watching as Asuku's face turned a bright red. The boy was getting mad, which was when Asuku's wrath was truly incurred. "Don't make a fool of me, Naruto," He screamed, raising the pipe high above his head with both hands and then slamming it down with a considerable amount of force, with the laws of gravity also acting on it, into Naruto's stomach. He yelped out in a high note of pain, a geyser of blood coming from his mouth as the pipe slammed into him, his right hand going imp for a moment, exposing the fang necklace held inside for a mere second, before Naruto closed it tightly. "What was that?" questioned Asuka, glaring down at the broken body of Naruto. "You saw exactly what it was, Baka Asuka," Naruto muttered, his eyes closing and opening in pain, as bright flares of red swarmed his vision. "Open your hand," he yelled, over and over, as he forced the metal pipe onto his right arm, over and over. He still did not let go, as the pipe kept going down on his arm. "Open it, Teme," he yelled, his eyes rushed over with bloodlust. "Open it." He would still not let his hand open, no matter how many times the pipe went down on his arm, overriding his common sense, which was desperately and futilely telling him to let go, so his arm would not become even more damaged. "Why won't you show me?" yelled Asuka, before slamming the pipe on a nearby brick building. The pipe crashed against it, and broke off into two pieces, with one piece still in the other one laying not that far away from Naruto. He sauntered over to the laying form of the boy, raising the broken pipe over his head, and thrusting it straight down, into Naruto's wrist. He cried out in pain, and by reflex not even the fang could prevent, let his fist go limp. The members of the gang looked to be ready to throw up. They had never seen their leader acting this mad, or this dangerous. The boy's arm was broken, and bits and pieces of bones stuck up from odd places on his arm. They didn't understand, until they saw what was held in Naruto's hand, laying there glittering in the sun. "What's this?" smirked Asuka, leaving the pipe held in Naruto's arm and picking the necklace from the boy's hand. He let the light wash over him, and felt himself becoming empowered by it. It was an amazing sensation, akin to sweating all day in the warm heat, then walking inside to take a cold shower and coming out completely rejuvenated. It was that amazing. "So you lied to me," Asuka whispered, not even paying attention to Naruto, who was violently thrashing on the floor. "You lied to keep this precious gem for yourself." He moved the fang around in his fingers, moving it around admiringly. "Let go of my precious," screamed Naruto, moving on the floor in an attempt to move closer to Asuka, who was admiring the necklace from far away. "Let it go. I found it, so it's mine." Asuka just waved him off, still staring at the fang. It was so incredibly real, like it had actually come from some once live thing. The tip of it looked so sharp, and he reached his finger out to prick his finger on it, like it was willing him to do so. He pressed down hard on it, blood welling up on said finger. His disposition changed, and he was back to his normal self. "So you lied to me, Naru-chan?" he snidely remarked, staring in disdain at the still struggling boy. He leaned down and whispered into his ear, "You know you shouldn't keep such valuable things from Asuka Kami." He then gave Naruto a sharp kick to his ribs which did nothing to stop the boy's struggling. Shrugging, he wrapped the necklace around his neck, and walked away, motioning for his gang to follow. "I bet this will get a humongous amount of money at the market, boys?" The boys yelled a hurrah, and followed their leader, who was walking confidently through the streets. He struggled more, the need to regain the fang more evident than ever. He moved this way and that, forcing the hole in his arm to grow bigger, and more blood to spill from him. "Calm yourself, Kit." A voice resounded in his mind, doing nothing to stop the boy's insistent struggle to escape the object pining him to the ground and go after the bigger boy. An audible sigh was heard in his mind, before Naruto felt something warm hook around the back of his spine and pull him back, into a wet and dark sewer. A large gate in front of him, a written piece of paper stuck to it reading, "Seal." Behind the gate was a thick fog, so much he couldn't see through it. He violently moved, getting off the ground and ignoring the fact he seemed good as new. The only thing running through his mind was the need to find that fang, and kill the person who had taken it from him. The large sigh was heard, as Naruto ran up to the bars and gripped his hands tight around them. He tried to pry them open, to no avail. "I said, calm yourself." A loud booming voice called to him, as a large red tail of red energy shot from the gate and wrapped itself around Naruto. He suddenly felt the urge to regain the fang dissipate, as his thinking became clearer and his mind returned to sanity. "What is this?" he asked himself. The tail of red slowly let go of him, as if it weren't so sure of trusting him with himself. Where am I? Are you better now, Kit? The voice asked, softer this time. Hi. Thank you for that, voice-san. He called out, not sure of whom he was speaking to. It was obvious, however, that the thing behind the bars was what had saved him from his mind. I would rather have a sane container who has brains than to have one whose mental stability is questionable. The voice chuckled, which resounded throughout the large chamber they were in. At least you're not like my last one. Container? Naruto said through the bars, confused. Container for what? The voice chuckled once more, a dark figure moving through the fog. Not for what, my young Kit. For whom? Something came walking through the fog, on all fours. It grew bigger and bigger, as it drew closer to the gate. From where Naruto stood, he could see 9 swishing tails behind the figure, which was walking on all fours. A red light came from the fog, and Naruto had to shy his eyes away from the intensity. When the red light had gone, he looked forward in shock, disbelief also etched on his face. Why your teeth? He pointed with his right hand, missing the non-existent hole in it, at the giant fox. The fox grinned, his large white canines glinting. Yes, Kid, I'm the Kyuubi no Yoko. Naruto resisted the urge to scream, and let loose his reasoning. He's supposed to be dead. The Yondaime killed him 3 years ago on October the 10th, when he attacked Konoha. A word stuck his mind, putting something more into his mind. October 10th, he whispered out loud, to the smile of pride from the fox. He attacked the day I was born. He said container, so that means, his thoughts trailed off, realizing what he had just discovered. The Yondaime never did kill you. He whispered to the fox, who had nodded, still smiling in pride. The day I was born, October 10th. That was the day you attacked. The fox nodded once more. If my assumptions are correct, then. They are correct, Kit. The fox smiled down at the boy. I attacked the day you were born. The Yondaime Hokage, Kazama Arashi, met me in battle riding a giant toad, holding a baby in his hands. We never got the chance to fight, as he had soon summoned the death god. He sealed me within you, as the death god cannot devour the souls of the tainted. Then, he trailed off once more, deep in thought. It explained so much. The sneers of the villagers. The contempt of the shinobi. The way he was always kicked out of shops, or why no one refused to give him jobs. The way random people on the street just backed away hissing as he walked by. It's all your fault. He whispered. It's your fault it's hard for me to live. The fox outright laughed, to the disdain of Naruto. It's your fault, he screamed at the still laughing fox. You're the reason why I have nothing. The fox suddenly stopped his chuckling, a tail shooting out from behind him and wrapping around Naruto. My dear Kit. It's not my fault. With your brain, I would have thought you would have figured that out. Naruto went still, and back into his mind, thinking. You're right, he said, a little grudgingly. Gomen, there's no one to blame. The fox let go of Naruto, impressed. Good. You have already learnt that humans have a tendency to want to blame someone, no matter how unreasonable it sounds. They both stayed there for a while, examining each other. The fox's eyes were red, looking deep into Naruto's blue ones. They held something in them, something only the fox could see. It was not revenge, nor was it hate, as it could have possibly been had he not been intelligent enough to understand. It wasn't fear, to be looking upon the famed Kyuubi no Yoko, the great 9-tailed fox. It was curiosity. The desire to learn, and find, steaming from the Kyuubi himself. Why have you brought me here? Asked Naruto, breaking the silence. And what is this place? Blunt, aren't you? The Kyuubi said, chuckling as he did so. It seemed he always chuckled a bit after every sentence, or while speaking. See if you can use that mind of yours to figure it out. He challenged him, looking for his reaction. He only nodded and sat down cross-legged, putting his hand on his chin, and scratching his chin. Before asking himself why the Kyuubi brought him there, he would have to know where there was. Seems the place is dark and damp. It looks like it's a little dreary, so whoever mad personality of a depressed man, assuming the one who made this place was a man. There is a level of water on the floor of the chamber, so the place must be in some kind of sewer. The cage to the Kyuubi is here, but there is a fog inside it, somehow keeping itself inside the cage even though there are bars. That signifies the cage is just a form of a seal. He looked to the Kyuubi's cage, and saw the paper once more. Correction. The cage is the seal. But what does the cage do? He shook his head in frustration. He was creating more questions, questions that he didn't need answers to at the moment. A more useful question would be, where is the cage? He thought for a moment, before his stomach grumbled. It seems even here you can get hungry, laughed the great Kitsune. Naruto just nodded, patting his stomach in an attempt to get it under control. It grumbled again, and he kept patting it. The water level seemed to be dropping, and the walls seemed to be contracting. Suddenly, he stopped and lifted up his shirt with his hands. A tattoo was on his stomach, something he had ever since he had been born. Is this it? He asked himself out loud. Is this where this cage is? The Kyuubi laughed, nodding his head. That's right. We're in your stomach right now, however crazy that may sound. Then, why did you bring me here? He questioned to himself, thinking of the reason why. Did you want to talk to me? No, Kit. I didn't want to talk to you. I needed to, the fox said solemnly, sitting down inside his cage. It's about that necklace you found. What about it? The boy asked. He seemed to always be full of questions. What is the purpose of it? Why did it make me want to protect it? Why did Osku bleed when he pricked his finger on it? Why did I not? The fox merely laughed, louder and longer than the previous ones. That necklace chooses who can have it, and he bled because Osku was not enough to hold it. Chooses? Naruto asked him. Inanimate objects cannot. The sound of the Kyuubi's laughter interrupted his words, as he stared curiously at the fox. Let your mind focus, Kit. Do not let it filter with questions that will eventually be answered. Do not think with reason, and do not think with logic. This world is as unpredictable as women. He laughed a little at this, which the young Naruto could not understand. Think only with your mind, not with your thoughts. Naruto nodded, understanding most of the fox's words, except for the part about women. Now, it is better that you have had the necklace taken from you. The fox snarled for a second, before continuing. It is a powerful object, and I fear you cannot handle the responsibilities of possessing it. What do you mean? That fang at the end of the necklace, and the string of the necklace itself, came from the hunter god, Hecate. He was a powerful beast, and the first of the werewolves. Werewolves? Naruto's eyes widened, realizing the truth of what he had just heard. Real werewolves? Aye, Kit. Werewolves exist in this world. You'd be surprised at what else actually does. He sat up, and walked straight to Hibar's, looking at Naruto through them. There are things in this world that would make your most horrible nightmares look nothing but a good dream. There are things that go bump in the night, Kit. The only problem is, they don't always just bump. Naruto listened, absorbing all the information the Kyuubi was feeding him. This might prove useful in future encounters. Who is Hecate? He asked him. Is he someone like you? The Kyuubi snorted, though it looked sort of pathetic. Hecate is a powerful being, coming close to even one. He has lived longer than I have, far longer. It's been said that he is a fallen god, someone sent to live life out as an immortal on this planet. If you ever have the misfortune to meet him, be thankful that your death will be swift. Do you fear him? Asked Naruto quietly. The Kyuubi didn't respond for a few moments, and Naruto had thought he had overstepped some sort of boundary. Hi, was all the demonic fox said. Why? It is not him I fear, it is what he represents to me. What is it that he represents to you, Kyuubi-san? Pestered Naruto. Power, was his single-word response, before turning back to the conversation about the necklace. That necklace was originally made by the Bai, which he then gave to the werewolves. It was by pure coincidence that you found the necklace and it chose you. It was also by pure coincidence that I was sealed within you, the one who found the necklace. I will help you control your urgings. Urgings? You felt compelled to safeguard that necklace, am I correct? He said, to which Naruto responded with a nod. That necklace will twist the mind of any mortal who comes into contact with it, and bend it to its will. It contorts the mind, and makes it do what the fang wants. When you pricked your finger on it and did not bleed no matter how hard you pressed your finger into it, it chose you as its master, the one who could wield its power. Power? Another one of Naruto's one-word questions echoed through the chamber. All power comes with a price, Kit. Sometimes, the price may be too high. He winced, as if remembering something. What price would be for this power the fang holds? Your subservience, and the deaths of innocents. The Kyuubi answered grimly. Even the tailed beasts cannot resist the fang's promise of power. It has even driven one of our own mad with it, and he holds almost no chance of regaining his sanity. He paused, thinking if he should tell the boy this. Have you fallen by its power once, Kyuubi-san? Hi. Not even Kami himself can resist looking once at the cursed object, before falling to it. It's that powerful? Asked Naruto, staring some other direction. He was ashamed. He had fallen to the fang, and if the Kyuubi hadn't helped him, he would have fallen to it. No, the fox said, to the confusion of Naruto. The fang is near worthless. It is the one the fang comes from that truly holds the power. His whispers and promises of power will whisper into your ears, forcing you to listen. Every time you sleep, his eternally grinning visage will seep into your mind, calling you to him. Every time you blink, flashes of red will go across your vision, and you will start imagining things. Even in death, he will haunt you. Naruto shook in fear, as the Kyuubi looked at him and laughed. Don't worry, kid. Holding the fang for the short amount of time you possessed, it will not make you possessed by it. After all, it is gone now, taken away by that horrid boy. But what about Osku Teme? His entire attitude changed when he saw the fang, and when he pricked his finger against it and it didn't bleed, he went back to normal. Why? The fang seemed him unworthy. Though the fang will call, and many will answer, few will be chosen by it. The fang will only take those whom it senses will carry it effectively. If it took on a weak host, not amount of power could possibly make them strong. So, what do I do now? Not just you, Kit. Your body and mind holds too, so it will be as from now on. Naruto slowly nodded. For now, you must rest. My chakra is healing you, and it will take a couple of hours for you to fully heal. Chakra? Questioned Naruto, looking at the Kyuubi confused. What's that? It is the basis for all living things, save for a few who can barely considered living. It fuels us, and is capable of many things. Naruto just muttered oh, and looked around, content with the answer. So what now? For now, you shall learn. He responded, sitting himself down before the cage, closer to Naruto so he wouldn't have to raise his voice to talk to him. After all, your mind is getting sharper and more accurate every day, thanks to me. I don't understand, as I've said before, chakra can do many things. He stood up, the pale moonlight reflecting off the bloodied ground beneath him. It was sticky here, but he paid it no heed. Raising his right arm, he found it good as it had been before. Arigato, Kyuubi-san. He said in his mind, hearing the Kyuubi grunt out a quick. You're wheelking with the Kyuubi for many hours, as it had been sometime in the day when he had pulled him inside his mind, and the moon was now fully raised above their heads. They had discussed many topics, ranging from their future, to the Kyuubi's teachings, which he had promised to teach him soon. He had said that he had committed many sins in the past, and he felt that the only way to earn redemption was to help Naruto, who could help others in turn. His stomach growled loudly, and he clutched it. It was incredibly empty, and he had no money on him. It was a shame. He had either four choices right now. He could starve and die, or he could steal food from a nearby ramen shop he knew. He immediately ruled out both choices. He didn't like the sound of dying. He also refused to steal from the ramen shop. He once held a job there, over 3 months ago. He liked it there and was paid well there, better than anywhere else he had ever worked. Unfortunately, the old man had to let him go. No one would come to the store because Naruto was there. He had said he understood, and left quietly after his last paycheck. The man had a wife and a daughter to support, while Naruto was only one person. At the time, he had not known the reason, but he did now. His third option would be to go out on the streets and beg. He doubted anyone would feel sorry for him, and quickly starched out that option. After all, who would be walking around with food in the middle of the night? He sighed, and went out in search of option number 4. He rummaged through the trash can, picking aside all the things he didn't need. A loud scream erupted from the next alley over, the sound of a howl filling the air. Naruto jumped at the noise, dropping the bag of trash he held in his hands at his feet. What was that? He called aloud, knowing the Kyuubi would be able to hear it either way. I don't know, Kit, answered the Kyuubi from within him. I'm going to go find out, he whispered, to which the Kyuubi gave him a mental throb of encouragement. He turned around, heading straight for the alley the scream had come from. Halt! A cold and emotionless voice called to him from above. A black-cloaked figure jumped down, his hood up. "What are you doing here?" He landed in front of Naruto, and the moon illuminated the space beneath his hood. He was wearing a boar mask, and his back was unnaturally straight. "Who are you?" Naruto asked in amazement. He had never seen someone looking like this before. "I am Anbu," he responded, his voice still cold. "Now, what are you doing here?" "What's Anbu?" Naruto asked, ignoring the man's question. "We are the elite of the shinobi, the personal servants of the Hokage himself," he responded, before running straight into Naruto, pushing him to the ground, covering him with his body. An unearthly howl sounded on the street Naruto had entered, as he saw over the shoulder of the shinobi a black object being thrown out, slamming into the wall opposite the street and sliding down it. A huge dark figure jumped out of the alleyway, arms held at its sides and howling to the moon, the fangs in its mouth glinting in the moonlight. The Anbu on top of him got off, and rushed straight towards the beast, doing several things with his hands, and crying out, "Kaden! Ano Kuruma! Fire release! Flame wheel!" He moved his hands forward, a giant wheel of flame erupting from them and heading straight towards the beast. "That's a ninjutsu, Kit," he said to Naruto in his mind. The boy was looking amazed at the display the man had put on. "Those things you saw him doing with his hands are called hand seals. They help concentrate chakra into a specific pattern, and release them at will." "That's pretty cool," Naruto thought, watching as the flame hit the beast straight on, causing it to wail. The Kyuubi snorted in his mind. "It might seem cool to you, Kit, but jutsus are nothing but a distortion of the natural balance of the world. These ninja have no care for life, and think that chakra will always refill itself automatically with rest." "Didn't you say you use chakra, Kyuubi-san?" "Well, of course. I'm practically made of the stuff. Humans, on the other hand, are not. Even though I have a near unlimited supply of the stuff, it doesn't mean I go using it for everyday stuff, like these jutsus." "Then what do you normally use your chakra for, Kyuubi-san?" He heard the beast howl, before running into the Anbu and lifting him off his feet. The Anbu was sent flying, and Naruto thought now would be the best time to take cover. He ran behind a wall at the corner of the street, and peeked his head out to watch the scene unfolding in front of him. "Well, Kit," the Kyuubi said in Naruto's mind, while the boy watched and analyzed the fight. The Anbu had taken out several star-shaped metallic objects from a pouch at his legs and had thrown them at the beast. It cried out in pain, as it charged once more at the shinobi. The shinobi backflipped, taking out more of the metallic weapons and throwing them at the beast, all of them impacting with a thud into the beast's chest, dead on. Chakra isn't made for some trivial things like that. You can't just wake up and use chakra one day. That's why there are people like the shinobi. They're trained from a young age, a little older than you are now, to manipulate chakra." Naruto nodded blankly, his eyes still focused on the fight between the shinobi and the beast he was currently fighting. After having been impaled by the star-shaped projectiles, the beast had only raised his arms and howled. Several more howls had responded to it, and the shinobi had looked around in wonder. Faster than Naruto could even comprehend, the shinobi had run forward, surging like a wave and colliding over the beast, his foot shooting out and slamming into the back of the beast's neck. It only howled more, falling to the floor and quickly getting back up. The clouds that had been covering the beast now moved, revealing its features. Naruto had to quickly cover his mouth in shock as he quietly gasped. Even inside him he heard the Kyuubi gasp. The beast had a head like a wolf, and was probably 7 feet tall on its hind legs. It was hunched over slightly, and the muzzle of the beast's head was opened, showing off the large white canines and the blood dripping from them. The beast's fur was brown, and was rather rough-looking. A foot-long tail swung from behind the wolf, moving with it. The claws of the beast were extended, around 4 inches long for each nail. It roared, and turned to face the shinobi that had attacked it. The shinobi made more of the hand seals the Kyuubi had been talking about, and stopped, holding his hands to his mouth. "Kaden. Furibakuden. Fire release. Flare bomb." A single ball of flame, roughly the size of a baseball, shot from the man's mouth, burning brightly. Just as it was about to hit the wolf in the chest, the wolf had leaned over more, and had howled right in front of the ball right before it was about to hit its face. Naruto had to cover his ears at the volume of the howl, closing his eyes as the light from the eruption of the ball He stayed like that for a couple of minutes, waiting. He smelled something burning, and raised his head. He opened his eyes slowly, making sure the light was gone. He wrinkled his nose. It smelled horrible. The wolf was laying there, his torso on fire, twitching from time to time. The shinobi was in a far worse condition. Naruto had to cover up his mouth, in case he threw up. He had seen unsanitary and bad things in his life, but this did not compare to anything. The shinobi was dead. Blood was splattered over everywhere, the fires of the shinobi's jutsu still burning in some places, lighting up the gruesome scene in front of him. More of the wolves were there, ripping apart the bloodied body of the shinobi. His head had been ripped clean off, and the mask had fallen off. The blonde-haired man that had been hidden underneath his mask was looking forward, his eyes closed but his face twisted in some sort of grim satisfaction. A loud ripping sound was heard, as the wolves used their power for the torso of the man, exposing his ribcage and the contents that lay underneath it. Naruto turned away, closing his eyes. "Run, Kit!" The Kyuubi told Naruto from inside him. His voice shook with fear, but Naruto was still having trouble keeping the image of the man's torn body from his mind. "Kit, get up and run." Naruto shut his eyes tighter, trying to keep the scene from his mind. Where did those monsters come from? He asked himself. Why are they here? He heard something sailing through the air, slamming into the edge of the wall he had been hiding behind and lodging itself into it. He fearfully opened his eyes, and could not help but scream. He never really liked Asuku, and had wished him dead many times, but he didn't actually wish this for him. His entire head was split apart, forming a diagonal crack starting from the top right of his skull, running down to his nose, splitting his entire skull, while still keeping it together. It looked like it had been ripped apart, as a few claw marks were etched across his face. When he had died, he had apparently been scared, as his face had been opened in shock, and his eyes were wide. Something moved within his shirt, and from his neck fell the fang and necklace, still dangling on the string. Naruto watched as it swung back and forth across his neck, mesmerized by its movements. "Kit!" The Kyuubi screamed in his mind. "Leave it and get the hell out of here." The Kyuubi shook the bars of his cage, ramming himself against them in a vain attempt to get out. Naruto's eyes widened, and he reached for the necklace. An overpowering urge to take it, and hold it lovingly in his hands was stronger than the Kyuubi's actions. The fox shot a tail out of the gate, hitting the walls of the chamber and glowing red as he pulsed a bit of his demonic chakra into him. Naruto suddenly touched the fang, and recoiled. It had burned when he touched it. "Get the hell away!" The fox screamed in his mind, the sheer volume causing him to wince and clutch his head. He nodded, and turned the other way. "Where are you going, Naruto-kun?" said a whispering voice from behind him. It was soft and low, but Naruto was still somehow able to hear it. "Don't you want this necklace?" Naruto froze, and turned the other way. The Kyuubi was shouting at Naruto louder, but he could not hear him. This man's voice seemed so provocative. It called to him, with something he couldn't pinpoint. A very tall man stood in front of him, possibly nearing 8 feet in height. He was also broad around the shoulders, and the open jacket he wore made of fur showed off his chiseled abdomen. His hair was black and rough, going in every direction possible. He had numerous scars around his body, showing he had fought in many battles, and lived to tell of them. "That's it, Naruto-kun. Take it," the man told him, his yellow eyes flashing. Naruto did as he bid, and ripped the necklace off Asuku's neck, slicing through the frailty of it and holding it in his open palm. He ignored the searing pain, as the necklace burned into his hand, causing smoke to rise. It filled him with power, and he thought he could die happily with it. "Do you like it, Naruto-kun?" the man in front of him questioned, smiling down to the boy, and showing off his long, sharp teeth. The feeling of power? Naruto lost himself in the sensation. It was pure bliss. He felt more alive than he had ever before. He smiled, and balled the hand that held the fang into a fist. It smoked in his tight grip, and burned an imprint of itself into his palm. "Hi," he answered, to which the man laughed. "Would you like even more, Naruto-kun?" He offered out his hand to Naruto, as a gesture of acceptance. "I can offer you power beyond you imagining. I can offer you the power of gods, and I can give you the means to destroy this village, a village who does not sense any value in you." Naruto slowly nodded, and took the man's hand. "Not yet, Kit. The Kyuubi grunted, exerting more and more of his chakra to let Naruto block out his tampering, and escape with his morality intact. Just ignore him for a little while longer. As if in response to the Kyuubi's request, 3 clack-clothed individuals landed gracefully beside the man, holding out a katan each at the man's arm. "Do not touch him," a quiet feminine voice said with authority. "We will be taking him," a male-sounding voice said, with as much authority as the female voice. "He is ours." A third voice agreed. "No one is taking that boy." An old voice burst in, wearing white robes and a white hat. Behind him were 10 Anbu guards, all holding a kunai out in preparation. The old man made a motion with his hand, signifying that they would move forward. They all made quick highs before moving faster than an average eye could see, and surrounded the 5 that were against each other, holding kunai to each of them, except Naruto. "That boy is a citizen of Konoha. He is under the protection of the shinobi." They all stood there in silence, tableaus made of statues. Naruto was in the center, a blade held over his shoulder and aimed for the man who had hand held out to him. The woman was right between them, holding her blade at the man's. On the other side of the woman was a man, also holding his blade to the man's arm. 3 shinobi were behind him, holding kunai at his throat, back, and head. The woman also had 3 shinobi on her, in the exact same position. The man behind Naruto had 2 shinobi on him, pointing a kunai at the arm that held his blade, and a kunai aimed for his throat. The man in front of Naruto had 2 shinobi on him, identical to the ones across from them. "Just let this last a few seconds more," the Kyuubi grunted, exerting much of his control to force his chakra into Naruto. Suddenly the man laughed loudly, clutching his stomach. "Do you think mere humans can face me, the hunter god Hecate?" He laughed, as he leaned forward, bypassing Naruto's arm completely and biting into Naruto's throat with his fangs, which had just grown larger. The man behind Naruto had heard him say this, and had leaned forward at the exact same time as Hecate had. He bit down into Naruto's neck, his fangs popping out and biting deep into Naruto's neck. The Kyuubi panicked, and pumped more chakra than he should have into Naruto. The original 3 tails he had put in multiplied by 2 to make a total of 6 tails of chakra pumped forcibly into the small body of the child. He fell to the floor of the cage, weakened. Naruto did not scream. He did make a single noise except for the sound of his blood gushing from his throat as it was ripped out by Hecate's fangs, the red light coming from his body blowing back everyone. Hecate himself was thrown back by the surprise of the power, and then held his head to the skies and laughed. He held his hands out to the sky, and gripped them into fists. He made no sound, and the intentions behind the words he would have spoken found another outlet instead. A giant burst of chakra came from his body, as he held his mouth out in a silent scream. All around Fire Country, people felt the wave of pain that passed over them. The sky flashed red, moving outwards in waves. The weakest of animals died, cutting off an integral part of the food chain. Trees leaned back, twisting themselves into a menacing sight. The buildings nearest to Naruto were blown away, crumbling to bits beneath the Kyuubi's power. The sky hovering over Konoha was now a blood red, swirling above the point Naruto was. Fire Country was changed forever, now matching its name. Naruto himself felt himself changing, powers behind both bites and the Kyuubi's power sinking into his skin. His eyesight changed before him, going from an ultraviolet color to a pitch dark, and finally resting on a heat vision-like vision. He felt his body growing harder, but his skin growing more sensitive to the temperature around him. The nails on his fingers grew longer and sharper, then grew back into themselves. He grew more teeth and felt them becoming sharper. He grew an extra pair of canines, and they extended nearly an inch from his mouth. He tasted the odorly threw up at the taste of polluted air around him. He smelled everything he could possibly smell, and just like his taste, he almost threw up at the smell. The muscles all over his body multiplied, causing him to feel an intense feeling of discomfort beneath his skin, as they suddenly stopped multiplying and grew stronger. He felt his bones grow tougher, before stopping when they felt to Naruto like they weighed a ton. He fell to the floor on his hands and knees, his feeling of pain still echoed in the Kyuubi's chakra he released as he clutched his head, voices whispering things he could not understand into his head. "Venator of Nox Noctis," they said. "Vox est vestri," they beckoned. "Pro pratium of an insens insantis vita," they whispered. Fang of Vastatio, they called him. Uguolo Iladud Santo in Vestri Via, they told him with aggression and anger. Servo qui mos servo vos, they said with sweetness and softness in their words. O Fang of Vastatio, Venator of Nox Noctis, they titled him. He lost his mind, growling and snarling as he felt his entire body change. Fur grew from every part of his body, and became coarse and rough. He felt his leg bones twist their shapes, and become longer. In fact, he felt every bone in his body shift, becoming longer. His face felt longer, and he looked to the sky. He even felt his already long teeth change, growing bigger and longer. He opened his mouth, and let out an earth-shaking howl. The blood moon raised high above his head as the red skies stayed. He woke up, not remembering the events of the night before. He slowly got up, and shook his head, feeling weak at the moment. He looked at the ground and blinked his eyes quickly, his vision flashing between red and blue for some reason. What the hell? He thought, as his vision switched back to blue. Some small specks of red were there beneath his sight, but every time his vision reverted to red, they would disappear. He shook his head once more, as a loud rumbling sound got caught in his ears. He kept shaking his head, hoping to get the noise out. He felt something burning into his skin, and he cried out in pain, as he rolled to the right. His sight was now red, and he looked to the sky, shocked. The entire sky above him was red, a blood red. The clouds, which he had known for his entire life to either be white or gray, to signify rain was coming, were now a blackish color, and everything beyond that was red. A cloud was coming towards them, flashing a violent purple. He grasped his ears, the sound of the rumbling growing louder. A pillar of purple light came from one of the clouds, striking a tree. It toppled, flaming with an unnatural purple. More followed, hitting multiple places in the forest and setting them alight with their purple flames. For some reason, he had expected to hear a couple of birds screech or a couple of thuds on the ground to signify something was coming. Instead, all he heard was the extremely loud cackling of flames, as the purple fire rose higher, encompassing more and more of the forest, sweeping through it at an unnatural rate. He had also expected to smell burning, but all he got was the smell of decay. The flames of the forest were now closer to him, and he put his hands beneath him, lifting himself up off the forest floor, and standing up. He looked back at the fire, noting how it did not seem like it was growing bigger, just moving in a single unit, unlike how normal fires spread. He just shrugged his shoulders and walked forward, further into the forest. Before he could walk any further, he stumbled upon something. Forgetting the fire behind him, he looked down at the thing he had hit with his feet, horrified. The unnatural purple flames burned behind him, before completely passing through by him, morphing the forest around him, changing it from the lush green it had been to a charred black, leaving few leaves on the trees themselves. He did not react to this, instead looking down at the thing in front of him. He leaned low, grabbing the ruined rabbit in his hands. He held it, examining it all over, seeing how the legs had been twisted from underneath them, the jaw wrenched open in a silent scream. The stomach of the rabbit had been torn out, nothing left inside the rabbit but a dark hole, smelling strongly of waste. He didn't even bother to look at its face. He already knew what he would find there, or what he wouldn't find. What the hell could have done this? He thought, placing the rabbit back down where he had found it softly, so as not to disturb its final resting place. You did. A voice rang in his mind, as Naruto clutched his head in pain. The voice was something else, something he had never experienced before. You're the reason the world will change, young one. Naruto kneeled over, his mind swimming with images from the previous night. He remembered standing between a group of 4 people, with the man holding his hand out to him, and he was grasping the hand. Another group surrounded them, speaking some words. The man in front of him had laughed, and suddenly leaned forward, ripping into his throat. He reached towards his throat in real life, keeping one hand on his head still. He had expected to find it ripped out, just as he had remembered, but instead, it was good as new, and notably tougher and harder now too. He gasped louder in pain, slamming his head into the ground as he tried to block out the memories. That, however, did nothing to stop them. He remembered something biting deep into the back of his neck, slicing past his skin and sinking into his jugular. He tried to scream or make a noise, but nothing happened. All he felt was his body changing, as 2 foreign powers entered his body, changing his entire existence. Blood spurted from his neck, as he felt something bubbling up from inside his stomach and something strange flowing through his veins, coming from two different places. He started to feel an unbearable itch under his skin, threatening to overwhelm his senses. Suddenly, the force bubbling in his stomach exploded, and he held his arms out, screaming silently. He felt it rush through his body, morphing the two foreign substances together. It exploded out of him, passing through him. Then he remembered feeling his bones changing and reforming themselves. He remembered feeling his throat being stitched together, the skin lapping against each other and healing. Then he remembered looking to the moon, and howling, before he ran off. He gasped on the floor, his memories returning. "Now boy," the voice whispered in his mind, as he felt something scraping beneath his skin, causing an itch to happen. He groaned out loud, as his blood boiled, setting fire to his veins. Pounding sounded in his head, as he doubled over and lay on the floor prone. His body then started moving on its own accord, as he stood. His eyes flashed red, as he reached inside his blood-stained shirt, and pulled out the necklace wrapped there. He fingered the necklace, smiling. "Now then, my chosen host, let's see what you can do," he said, smiling once more, howling to the moon. Naruto sat up groggily, shaking his head rapidly as he tried to clear it. He put a hand beneath him, and tried propping himself up. His hand slipped out from underneath him, causing him to topple back down and land on something hard. Opening his eyes, he stared in shock at the human skull in front of his face. An eye was still attached inside the skull, and some of the face was still there. A few locks of hair were on the skull's head, but everywhere else the flesh had been ripped off, and some parts of the brain were showing. His eyes widened, and he inhaled in shock. He smelled so clearly and so strongly the stench that he threw up, right beneath him. It took him a while, but when he was done, he collapsed on the floor, wet with vomit and blood. "What the hell is this?" he whispered out loud, now staring at the torn body of a human male. "Where the hell is this?" He looked like he was in a small, quiet little town, with the buildings spread out periodically around the landscape. "It's a beautiful sight, isn't it?" My very same voice laughed in his mind, his words echoing. Such an awe-inspiring aroma as well, the smell of helpless people slaughtered. The voice laughed once more in his mind, as Naruto lay on the ground, thinking. Who the hell is it? Where the hell are they talking from? He attacked his mind for answers, looking for some small hint or detail he may have missed as to the identity of the voice. The voice inside his head laughed once more, as Naruto tried moving his head. In the end, all he was able to accomplish was to move onto his back, and look at the sky. "My host, you are weak. I can make you strong." Naruto froze, hearing him call him his host. If the voice was coming from his mind, then it might be. "Kyuubi-san," he said inside his head, wondering. The voice sounded nothing like the Kyuubis, yet the only thing capable of talking to him in his mind was the Kyuubi. Once again, the voice laughed, sounding malicious in his thoughts. "No boy, I am not the pathetic Kyuubi. I am something far greater, and far more powerful. I can offer you power beyond your imagining, and I can give you the power of gods." The words sounded familiar to him, as if he had heard them before. He suddenly jolted upright, and his hands reached towards his neck. Underneath his shirt, he felt it. "The necklace," he whispered into the night, the sounds of his words seeping into his mind. They seemed sweet and melodic. As if he could just always follow them, forever until the end. "Yes, boy. I am the necklace. I am also a part of you, as much as you are a part of me." The voice inside his mind chuckled. "Just take it in your hand, and hold it." "No." Naruto screamed out loud, remembering the Kyuubi's warning of the necklace. "Get out of my mind." The voice chuckled, as something yellow leaked from the fang and into Naruto's hands. They sunk in, going into his body. "My gracious host, the Kyuubi isn't well right now. He can't do anything." It chuckled, as it manipulated the yellow that had gone into his skin to twist Naruto's mind. "Just take the necklace, my host. Take it, and power will be yours." Naruto struggled, his hands moving on their own accord, drawing closer and closer to the fang. He tried pulling them back, only to find they would not respond. He settled for moving his body, trying to keep his hands away from the fang for as long as possible, until the Kyuubi awoke. "My host, you should know that your effort is futile. You can do nothing to stop this." The voice laughed, as Naruto's hands took hold of the fang, and burned into his palms. He raised his head to the moon, howling because of the pain. "Now, you are mine." He felt something enter his head, whispering instructions and orders to him. He stopped howling, and let his hands go limp, still grasping the necklace, which had stopped smoking in his hands. "Hi," he whispered, a small smile going across his face, as his eyes flashed red. He roared into the night, the moon not visible due to the time of month. The hunters backed up, fearful of the terror he was about to unleash on them. He ran forward, on his fours, and slammed into one of the vampires, cutting through him with his claws. His bloodlust was not sated, as he ran forward more, intent on catching the vampires as they ran. He growled in his breath, the almost pitch darkness having no effect on his heat vision eyesight. The group in front of him split into two, a small group going one way and a bigger group going the other. Both of them were running at high speeds, both of them running away. He grinned a wolfish smile as he watched their retreating forms. This would be a fun hunt. He's not supposed to be that strong, she yelled, as she ran through the thick tropical forest. He's not even supposed to be able to turn when it's a new moon. She grunted, feeling as her leg was spilt across a branch she had been too distracted to see. She paid it no mind, as it was soon closing up because of her vampiric abilities. "He's not normal," her companion replied. "That's what Lucian told us, remember?" She grunted, feeling another branch slide across her leg and cut it. "Of course I remember. He said that we should always be on guard around him, and that to take him out before night. Then he said that if night should fall, we need to run." He suddenly cried out, as a large black wolf slammed into his back from above, bringing him crashing to the ground. She stared behind her in shock, nearly emptying the contents of her stomach. The sight before her was sickening. The beast had its jaws wrapped tightly around her deceased friend's skull, its teeth sunk deep into him. It had one of its great paws covering his chest, pressing him down into the ground as it tore into the dead man's head. She could only watch in morbid fascination as the beast ripped off the skull, biting down on it and crunching, bits and pieces of the brain seeping out of between the beast's jaws. It looked directly at her, and roared, the force of it blowing her back into a tree. She slammed against it, and a tree branch impaled her. She cried out, now unable to move, as the branch was right in her stomach. Now she had no choice but to turn her head, as the beast ripped into the corpse of her fallen comrade. Blood landed on her, even from far away, as the beast tore through him, ripping out bones, organs, flesh, and whatever else was in there. An arm came flying off, hitting her in the face with a palm. It stung, having an arm fly across a forest and smack her across the face. "I'm a vampire, damn it," she cried out into the night, the werewolf beast not even listening to her. "I'm supposed to be a hunter of the night," she cried out in frustration, moving her body slowly along the branch. Blood splattered on her feet, as the beast in front of her finished eating her comrade, and was now steadily approaching her, eyes maddened with bloodlust. Suddenly it stopped, and looked curiously at her. Its yellow eyes flashed red for a moment, before she shivered. "What's this feeling?" she wondered in her mind, slowly being drawn to the wolf. She watched as the wolf let off an evil smirk, before walking closer to her, changing its form. Bones twisted and grew smaller, fur receded until the only hair left on his body was his face. His head became smaller, before becoming the size of a small human boy's, and his claws became smaller. By the time he had reached her, he was a small boy, no older than 6 years old. "Hello, ma'am," he called to her, his voice soft and sweet. "It's a fine night, isn't it?" She nearly swooned, as the boy stood on his tiptoes to reach her face, and stroked her cheek lovingly. She murmured, the pain of having the tree branch impaled upon her now non-existent. "Who are you?" "Shush," he said quietly, "you don't want to wake your friend, do you?" He smiled devilishly. "Besides, don't you like this feeling?" She gasped, as the boy leaned upwards, his tongue sliding across the base of her neck. She nodded, moaning as something long and hard brushed against her neck. She felt something pierce her skin, not feeling the pain of dying, only the blissful feeling that came with this boy. He watched from the shadows, as the group of 10 kept moving. Their eyes were moving this way and that, warily watching for any signs of their pursuer. 2 women led the front, watching more carefully than the rest. His lips curved into a smile, as he watched the way the sensual females moved. They were graceful, and not at all like the males. That was why he preferred the females better. They were always so much fun to watch. His eyes flashed red in the darkness of the trees, and the females saw this. Their heads swiveled around to look at the place, but whatever was there was already gone. "Where the hell is the way out of this place?" asked one of the male vampires. He kicked a rock out of the way, as they made it into the clearing. The sun would be up in a few short hours, and they had not yet found a shelter. If worse came to worst, then they could just hide beneath the leaves, away from the sun. "We're going," Nero, one of the females of the Grow Other, along with her. "Wait," he cried, holding a hand out, warningly. "Why are you leaving?" One of the females sighed, before pointing to herself and the other girl. "We're going, because we need to go." Nero only looked at them confused. He really was a thick-headed sort of man. "If you're going, take me along with you." He soon found himself on the ground, crushed by a female's foot. "Hentai baka. I think that's something like, 'You perverted idiot, we need to go.'" "Then take me along with you," Nero responded, his face still buried in the dirt. The female atop him only sighed, raising her foot and slamming it into his head once more. If he was a normal person, he would have already been dead. "Baka," she mumbled, going back to her companion, and walking away, as Nero got back up. "Wait," he made to follow them, before another of the males stopped him. "Don't." He glared at him, trying to get their point across. "They have business to take care of." Nero's face took on a speculative look, as he put his hand to his chin and rubbed. "Why are they doing business now, while we're on a mission?" He wondered out loud, much to the annoyance of the other man. He just sighed, walking away to rest with the others. "I swear, Nero is so slow," she kicked a tree, causing it to rumble and shake. "He can't even take a hint." The other woman beside her nodded, both of them walking along at a brisk pace. "Then maybe you should just request a transfer from Lucian-sama," she suggested. She just kicked another tree in response. "There's nothing wrong with asking. Besides," she said slyly, "I think Lucian-sama has taken a liking to you." She snorted and said, "That's shit and you know it. Lucian-sama takes a liking to everyone, including guys." The other woman just laughed, as they ended up at their destination. "Keep a lookout," she told her, to which she only nodded and flung her hand in a gesture to hurry. "Why do you think Lucine-sama told us to hunt down this wolf?" she asked her friend, who was now doing some business. "Could you please not talk to me right now? I'm kind of busy." The other woman grunted, and they lapsed into silence. She felt a tap on her back, and swung her body around, ready to face her would-be attacker. "Maybe I shouldn't have tried to sneak up on you, if you're going to react like that," a little boy said to her, playfully. She looked at him in wonder, as her friend came out from behind the tree to look at the little boy. He was probably 6, and had a mop of blonde hair on his head, with black highlights. He was small, but that was natural for a kid. His yellow-slitted eyes stared at her, from a face with 3 whisker marks running down each side of his cheeks. He was smiling, and sticking out from underneath his lips were a set of 4 canines, each around 2 inches long. "Hello." He greeted them, his hand shooting up and causing them to tense for a moment, before they figured out he was just waving. "What the hell are you doing here, Gaki?" she said to him, walking over and ruffling his hair. "It's dangerous out here." The boy only laughed, as he looked at her friend. "You're really pretty, ma'am," he told her, causing her to blush. "What's your name?" "I'm Soko, about. The one playing with your hair right now is Nakunaru, to die." She flashed him a smile, to which he responded the same, revealing his teeth. Each of them looked like they were extremely sharp, like they were made to bite down and rip out. "Soko-chan and Nakunaru-chan," he announced, flinging his arms into the air, in a happy gesture. "Want to play with me?" Nakunaru got serious, looking down at Naruto. "Sorry, Gaki. We're on a mission here." "Mission?" he questioned, putting a finger into his mouth and tilting his head in curiosity, his fangs sticking out from underneath his lips. "What's that?" Soko walked to the boy, rubbing his hair just as Nakunaru had done. She leaned over, so she was at eye level with him. "It's a secret," she told him, pausing between each word to wave a finger in front of his face, signifying she couldn't say. "Ah," he whined, pouting at her. "Can't you just tell me?" he pleaded to them, his eyes nearly watering. Soko looked over to Nakunaru, who nodded her head. I don't know, Gaki. She told him teasingly, causing him to pout more. She turned to Nakanaru. You think we should tell him? She asked her teasingly. I don't know, Nakanaru responded, her smiling face visible in the moonlight. Please? He asked them, his eyes now watering. The two could not help but giggle, both of them thinking he looked really cute and small that way. Oh fine, Soko told him, smiling, but first, you need to tell us your name, and promise us that you'll leave as soon as you can. He nodded excitedly, rapidly telling them his name. Uzumaki Naruto, huh? Nakanaru said, rolling the name on her tongue, a sense of familiarity overcoming her. Where have I heard that name before? Naruto only continued nodding his head, telling them to hurry on and tell them their secret mission. Soko smiled at Nakanaru, then stared down at the boy. You still haven't promised us that you'd leave the forest. Naruto just kept nodding, giving them a signal to continue. All right, Naru-chan. Nakanaru told him, still keeping herself at eye level. We're here because a dangerous animal is loose in this forest, and we were told to kill it. Naruto's eyes widened, as he looked at them both in shock and despair. What's wrong, Naru-chan? Asked Soko, looking at Naruto worriedly. He backed away from them, looking at them with fear. You guys are animal hunters? He asked them, tears in his eyes. Both Nakanaru's and Soko's eyes relayed shock, then understanding. The boy had misunderstood them. No, Naru-chan. We're here hunting a dangerous animal, and a mass murderer. It's a horrible beast, it shouldn't even be alive. Dangerous animal? He asked them, confused. His tears had been wiped away by the sleeve on his arm. Yes, Naru-chan. A dangerous animal, like the ones you can hear about from Fire Country. The two gave shivers, despite the rather warm night. The creatures from Fire Country had all changed, morphed and twisted into something far more dangerous than anything else in the world. It was all because of the sudden outburst of chakra, expelled from their main village, Konoha. No matter who you were, or where you were, you felt it. It was a maddening feeling, and it was said to have twisted the very heavens above that cursed land, making it a literal hell on earth. It was said only the strongest of the strong still lived in that village, or even in that country. Animals and beasts there were said to be extremely dangerous, one of them said to be able to overpower 10 fully grown adults at a time. It was because the chakra burst had killed all the lower life forms, causing the still living ones to have to feed off each other, forcing themselves to evolve at an increased pace. The chakra also probably had something to do with that. Wow, was all the young boy said, going forward, and staring out into the trees, his face going from the shocked look on his face, to an unguarded expression. It looked like he was remembering something, probably from his past. Just as Soko and Nakanaru were about to walk away, Naruto called them back. Can you guys do something for me please? He asked them sweetly, as he turned to them smiling. Yes, Naru-chan? They both asked him, as he walked forward, standing right in front of them, looking into both of their eyes. Are you sure you can do this? He asked them both, as they nodded encouragingly. Of course we can. We're hunters of the night, Naru-chan. We can do anything. They both declared, a little arrogantly. Oh really? The boy said, his lips curving into a twisted smile. Both of them were puzzled by his strange change in behavior, before his eyes flashed red and their minds were no longer theirs. Oi! You're back, Nero called, walking over to them. Both their heads were angled to the ground, their postures nearly the same, with both hunching their sharply in front of them, looking at each of them. What took you guys so long? Did you finish your secret, important business? The rest of the group sighed, before returning back to their individual duties. Nero looked over each of them, noting their change in stance, and asked, What's wrong with you? You both seem like you're dead. Neither of them said anything, both still keeping their heads low to the ground. Nero walked over, tapping Soko on the shoulder, his other hand doing the same to Nakanaru's shoulder. Oi, I'm talking to you. They did not respond, and only settled for lifting their arms up, as Nero still kept his hands on their shoulders. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He didn't get to finish his sentence, as they both brought their arms down, crashing them into both of Nero's arms. He screamed in pain, drawing the attentions of the other 6 vampires. They all stood, and immediately ran straight for the girls, pulling out daggers, short swords, and one of them taking out a large flail. The two women disposed of Nero first, bringing back both of their fists, and driving them straight into Nero's skull. The impact caused from the combined women's strength left him on the ground, lying prone. The flail smacked against Nakanaru's shoulder, but she just swept it aside, much to the shock of its wielder. He felt a foot driven into his neck, and he was flung into a nearby tree, smacking against it and digging into it. The flail fell from his hands, and Nakanaru caught it, and swung it, narrowly missing a man with a dagger, who had leaned backwards just in time to avoid it. At Nakanaru's side was Soko, who had ducked downwards, to dodge a sword slash, and had gone upwards, her arms locking behind the man's head, and driving her knee straight to his chin. The force of her knee nearly ripped the man's head right off, the spine being the only thing keeping it on. He fell to the floor, deader than he had already been. Another man rushed forward, getting in close and slashing at her waist, cutting into her skin. She raised her head to the sky, revealing her glowing purple eyes and elongated fangs, as she screamed into the darkness. The man in front of her had to cover his ears, to avoid hearing the scream, and that was her chance. She surged forward, biting deep into the man's skull. Her powerful jaws and strong fangs dug deep into his head, piercing the bone and digging into his brain. He gurgled, as he felt all of his functions leave him, and fell to the floor. Nakanaru brought the flail back, now standing back to back with Soko, whose fangs were dripping with blood. 3 of the men were surrounding them, and one with a katana ran forward, swinging the blade skillfully and quickly. Nakanaru brought the flail up, and tried to slam it into the man approaching. He moved to the side, the flail impacting itself into the ground beside him and causing a cloud of dust to appear. Nakanaru growled, showing off her fangs, as the man with the katana came, slicing straight through the arm that held the flail. Nakanaru screamed towards the sky, and before the vampire could give the finishing blow, Soko came, biting into the man's neck. She sucked the blood out of him, rejuvenating herself. The cut on her waist closed up instantly, and she roared. While she was roaring, a man with a short sword came up behind her, driving the short sword straight through her skull. It came out the other side, bringing along with it an eyeball. He let go of the sword, watching as it dropped along with Soko. Nakanaru turned, swinging her stump of an arm at the man. Her blood touched his skin, and immediately started burning, the disintegrating effects of her blood seeping into his skin, as he screamed. The blood made its way underneath his skin, burning everything and leaving nothing except emptiness. He fell to the floor, his hands clutching his head as he died, again. Nakanaru growled, facing the last of the vampires. He was holding a simple dagger, holding it aloft with his right hand and in a reverse grip. He leaned low, to be able to react faster, and keep himself in a smaller position. He felt the temperature rise slightly, and knew it would be sunrise soon. He would have to hurry. Nakanaru ran forward, throwing her blood at him. He jumped into the air, avoid the red-colored liquid. He landed behind her, his back turned to her. He twisted the dagger around, so he was now holding it by the tip of the blade. He turned, throwing the dagger. Combined with his turning movement, it flew faster, but Nakanaru's vampire reflexes brought her arm up, just in time to catch the blade with her arm. She growled, running forward, her arm flying behind her, and her stump of an arm splashing the ground in front of her. The man growled, jumping backwards, appearing to be flying, and landed in a tree. He looked to the horizon, and saw that he had less than 4 minutes to defeat her and find shelter. Nakanaru flew up into the trees, landing on the exact same one the man was on. Her blood dripped off her arm, landing on the branch. It tore through it, weakening it. Both of them stood there, hearing the sizzle as the branch was slowly burned through. Making his decision, he jumped upwards onto a higher branch, just as the one he had been on broke. He flew through the air, going from one branch to another, Nakanaru trailing behind him, flinging blood at him. He made one final jump, landing in a clearing. The sun was barely tipping over the horizon, so he would only have one chance before they were both dead. "Gomen," he told her, bowing, as she growled at him, "this is for your own good. You've obviously been possessed, and I must end it, for your honor." He bowed once more, bringing his right palm to his fang, and biting into it. He felt a hole appear there, and gripped the vein on beneath his palm with his left hand, as Nakanaru ran forward. He felt the blood well up in his arm, making it seem bigger, while his palm seemed smaller. Nakanaru was right in front of him, when he released his left hand, and pushed the blood out of his arm. It shot forward, like a cannon, and splattered all over Nakanaru. She screamed, falling to the floor as her body burned. He dropped to the ground, breathing heavily as Nakanaru died. The sudden loss of blood was pricey, hence the reason why vampires only use the ability to fling their blood sparingly. He felt the temperature rise even more, and felt a slight burning sensation on his skin. He looked past the trees, and saw the sun would be up soon. He ran towards the trees, only to be stopped by something on his ankle. Looking down, he saw a vine there, wrapped around his leg. Following the vine, his eyes laid to rest upon a young boy, with an extra set of canines. "Ohayu, Vampire-san." The boy greeted, bowing his head mockingly. "It's going to be a good sunrise, isn't it?" He laughed heartily, as he struggled to release the vine. Frustrated and panicking, he dripped his blood onto the vine, and burning through it. He turned the other way, running towards the forest. He heard the boy behind him laugh, and heard a low growl. He heard the sounds of thumping, and was suddenly blown back to the middle of the clearing, a werewolf standing in front of him. It growled low again, and walked backwards, shifting into the form of the small boy. "Tisk! Tisk! Tisk!" The boy told him, wagging his finger to his words. "You should watch the sunrise. You look oh so pale." The boy laughed, disappearing into the dark depths of the forest, and the man screamed, as the sunlight hit him and shredded the skin from his body. In a cave he had found, he slept quietly, his normal dreams coming to him. The room was dark, and he could barely see. He stepped forward, walking onto the blood-stained floor. He continued walking, the wet plops echoing throughout the room. He stopped, as his foot hit something. He stared down, looking into the face of Osku. His skull was entirely split down the middle, but both sides were still attached. Some of his brains spilled out, and he had to repress a slight shiver, as he smiled. Deserved it. He had done so many horrible and terrible things to him in life that he deserved to be dead. He continued walking, his shoes touching the blood, causing his footsteps to become heavier, due to the fact the blood was making his shoes sticky. He came across another body, hitting a man covered in white robes, stained red. Several metallic objects were impaled upon various parts of his body, blood spilling from the wounds. His mouth was closed, a smile upon his lips. His arms were crossed over his chest, and his eyes were closed, in peace. He only looked down at him, the smile slowly disappearing off his face, replacing itself with a look of curiosity. He had always wondered who exactly this man was. He never remembered meeting him, yet here he was, among the dead. He waited there for a few moments, looking over him, trying to see if he could place him somewhere in his mind. After a while, he shrugged, continuing on through his graveyard of the dead. Countless bodies he passed, the bodies of the slain and the slaughtered. Some dead by him, some died for him. Men, women, children, the elderly, he had killed them all. Not many of them had been able to give him any satisfaction of their deaths, but his counterpart gained glee. For every kill he earned, the voice whispered words of praise to him, offering him more and more power. He passed by a small baby, whose head he had bitten clear off, when he had been 5 years old. He stopped by the body, remembering the sweet fresh blood of the small child. He continued walking forward, meeting a woman and a man, a husband and a wife. Beside them lay a little girl, no older than 7. He smiled, remembering how he had manipulated the girl's mind, forcing her to kill her own parents. Afterwards, he had sampled the girl's blood. Her mind was lost to him even then, at her dying breaths. More and more bodies appeared, showing him whole towns he had massacred, whole villages laid to waste. His smile grew more and more, cataloging all the kills he had ever made. 2045. That was his number. 2045 people, all of them dead because of him. He smiled, remembering the feeling of power he got from their deaths. He laughed, knowing the reason why he was so powerful. His reach crept up to his shirt, feeling the familiar weight of the fang around his neck. He held it in his hand, no longer hearing or feeling it sizzle as it came in contact with his flesh. He walked onwards, his hand still clasped around the fang. He smiled, as he saw the 12 new additions of his collection of dead. He stopped there, as he knew that a door would soon appear, and he would go through it, back to reality. He stood there, for what seemed like hours, waiting for the door to appear. Just when he was getting impatient, a loud resounding roar shook through his being, red light coming from every point in his body. He fell to his knees, as it flooded his system, and he felt his mind completely return to him, no longer tainted by the fang. He dropped it, as the heat coming from it was so unbearable. A flood of things came to him. Images of the moon shining in the night erupted in his head, as the sounds of howls came to his ears. Mixed in with that were the sounds of wings, fluttering, and small screeches. He felt his hair grow longer, becoming more shaggier, and his eyes growing smaller, and his pupils becoming larger. He no longer felt himself moving, becoming completely still, just like the dead. He smelled the strong stench of blood that he had known for so long, even stronger now, until it hurt to even breathe in. He could feel the coldness in the room, from the sheer amount of dead there. He awoke in a sewer-like place, no water on the ground. In front of him were bars, with a piece of paper stuck in the middle, reading the kanji for seal. A fog was behind the bars, shrouding whatever lay behind them in secrecy. "Hello again, Kit," a weary-sounding voice said from behind the bars, and out stepped a small red fox, with one tail floating behind it. "It's nice to see you looking so healthy." The fox's eyes were bloodshot, and its whole body looked like it was ready to fall apart at any moment. Naruto just looked at it in shock. He had never known a fox to be able to talk. Hell, he had never even known a fox before. All he knew were the wolves sent after him. He smiled a little despite the situation. They were always so much fun to hunt. "Damn, it's just like I thought," the fox said, falling to the floor miserably. "You still have some traits." "Huh?" he responded dumbly, looking at the fox as it sighed. "Also seems you have yet to regain your memory." The fox sighed again, as Naruto scratched his head sheepishly. Sumimasen." He bowed, still starching his head and smiling at the fox. "But who are you, and where are we?" The fox sighed once more, as he looked at the boy's behavior. "I'll leave you to find that out, Kit. After you do, I think it's time for a little bit of re-education." The boy only looked at the fox confused, wondering what he meant. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.